Hi everyone, I'm Kimberly Parsons of Hearth and Gnome, and welcome to the first video in my series this month about bringing the arts home. If you're watching this video, I think I can safely assume that you understand how important the arts are to our human experience and for the children in your life. So I'm not going to spend any time convincing you of what I believe you're already here for. Today I want to talk to you about how to make room in your home for the arts. Now when I say the arts, of course I'm talking about music. Those are the products that I have in my shop are for bringing music home specifically, although they do also include handwork, painting, drawing, different things like that. And as Waldorf-inspired homeschoolers, the arts are all around us in my home. We made the choice a number of years ago to get rid of all of our commercial art, and by commercial art I mean art that is mass-produced, where it's possible that I could have the same thing in my living room that you have in your living room, that someone has in their living room 3 states away or even in another country. And that I wanted to support artists that I knew, artists that lived locally, or artists that we encountered in various travels and things that we had, and even things that we had made. I feel like it's so important for kids to see their own creations being used, being displayed, and being made much of. And so if you were to visit my home, you would see a number of things. In fact, a lot of my Instagram feed this month are things that we have around us in our home. But it's an intentional choice, and it's something that we had to make room for. In our case, when we decided to move away from commercial art, that meant that some of our commercial art had to go, quite a bit of it, things that were on the walls or things that were on display. And we're still working on that. It's a process. It's hard because some of the things are things that were given to us from other people, so they have that emotional connection, but they weren't made by a local artist. They were not made by an artist at all. They're mass-produced items, and so it's a process. But to make room for those paintings and textiles and sculptures and pottery and all the many things that we have in our home that were made by people that we know and love, or that we've actually met, we had to make room. So today's talk is all about that, making room in your home and in your life for bringing the arts home. Probably the first thing is the one I mentioned, which is actually making space in your home. If you are going to make the creative process part of your life, whether that's music or painting or drawing or having craft supplies for your kids, you're going to have to make some room. And we've gotten pretty creative about that, and maybe you can think outside the box in your home and find some places for things. We have an antique dining room set. It's one of the first things that my husband bought for us and for our home after we were married, and it's beautiful. It's a gorgeous piece of furniture. So we've got the the pedestal table and beautiful china cabinet and beautiful buffet. But that buffet is not full of serving pieces as it might be in someone else's home. That buffet is filled with art supplies. On one side, that's where we store our adhesives and our paint. I know we're really pushing the envelope there, and we're asking for a disaster. But that's, our children are a little older, and we felt like that was okay. One side has our modeling materials in it, and then the drawers are full of paper and chenille stems and stickers and beads and feathers and all sorts of things. And that is where my kids know that they can have their craft supplies. Now, we have outgrown that, and we also have some other cupboards that, again, other families might have chosen to store serving pieces or china in, and that's where we've chosen to store our art. I make a lot of room for storing music, and I've made a lot of room in a lot of unusual containers. I have baskets, which I prefer to get through our secondhand stores. I like to buy used as much as possible. It's a personal choice, but it's a great and inexpensive way to do it. We also reuse our glass jars. We don't have glass recycling near us that's convenient, so we save a lot of glass jars, and a lot of our pens and pencils and paintbrushes and all those kinds of long skinny things are in jars in our shelves. So really, before you can bring the arts home, you have to actually make physical space in your home for those tools and supplies. You also are going to have to perhaps look at your budget. We spend, I wouldn't say a lot on our art supplies, but there have been some things that we've chosen to invest in. For example, we do have some very high quality watercolor paints by Stockmar. That wasn't something that we could buy when we first discovered Waldorf Education, but we made some adjustments to our budget and decided to invest in those. We invested in some high quality crayon blocks and some crayons that are actually beeswax instead of paraffin. And we've also chosen to invest in high quality yarns. Now we do have some acrylic yarns that are, when my kids are wanting to make a pulley system or something like that where they just need a long length of string, they do not use the fine wools and the alpaca. They use the acrylic yarn for things like that. But you're going to have to slowly and surely over time do that. Again, I highly recommend you check out your used, or upcycled places. If you're lucky enough to live in a big city, if you live in Austin, for example, there are some really great creative reuse places where you can go and they just have bins and bins of things. Knitters and sewers are notorious for buying things and adding them to their stash, and they do have a specific project in mind most of the time, but often those projects don't materialize. And every few years, knitters and sewers and quilters and the like, I can say this because I do all of those things, feel badly about this stash of things and finally decide to downsize and to pass them on to someone who will use them. So if you look used and keep your eye out, you'll find some things like that you can save on. There are a lot of forums online where you can get high quality crafting and making supplies and get those used as well. So when you're making room in your home for bringing the arts in, you've created, you'll have to create some literal space, and you may have to also create some budget. It can be done very, very simply. The arts should not be something that only the wealthy can afford to do. And if all that you can ever afford are some Crayola markers and the little patty pan of watercolor paints, then that's fine too. But it is fun to get to use some of those higher quality things. And depending on what you and your children most enjoy, maybe the funds that you have for art supplies and things like that go toward things in that one area. You might also consider finding budget for being able to take in some live music, to take in some theater, maybe get a subscription to an online radio station that plays high quality music. But when you're thinking about the budget that you have, whatever that may be, do like you would with any other line item in your budget. Whatever is the priority for you, whatever you want most for your children, then take whatever dollars you have there and figure out how you can apply them to that particular artistic endeavor, whether it's supplies or an experience for them. So when you're making room, we've talked about space and we've talked about budget. I'll touch on also making room for things perhaps that you have not made room for before. Maybe opera is outside of your personal experience, and maybe a lot of people, you mention opera and they kind of give a little shiver. And I understand that because I also used to feel that way, and I still feel that way about certain operatic styles or composers. There are styles and composers I do not enjoy. I can appreciate the skill that it takes. I can appreciate the creative endeavor. I can appreciate how hard my friends are working to produce that particular thing. But I don't like all opera. It's not all the same. Just as what there are with any other kind of musical art form. There are different performers and different things that I enjoy. But maybe make some room for some music that you haven't heard before. Maybe expand your horizons if you haven't spent a lot of time exposing your kids to world music. Make room for something different in that way. If you are a very musical family and you already spend some time with that, maybe you could expand and take your kids to an art museum. It doesn't even so much matter what it is, whatever is near you, whatever you can get to, and just go and take it in and see what there is to see. Let them have that experience, but make room for something different maybe than what you're already used to. So make room in your home, make a little room in your budget if at all possible. Make room in your box, that box that you put yourself in artistically of what it is that you like or enjoy, or what your family likes or enjoys. Maybe come out of the box a little bit and try something new. You're also going to have to make some time, and this is hard, especially if you are a homeschooling family. I feel like every year our time becomes more and more precious, simply because my children are growing academically. They're growing in their ability to do and understand, and I have a lot of goals for them. They have a lot of goals for themselves, and I still want them to get to enjoy childhood. So to prioritize the arts in our home, we've had to make some tough choices. We have chosen not to play organized sports. We are in a small rural area, so we don't have very many choices. And the choices that we do have, because we're in a small rural area, it requires a lot of travel to get to the other teams. And so we've chosen not to do that as a family. We've chosen not to do evening activities other than mom's rehearsals, because we want our kids to be well rested. And that's a choice that we've made. And of course, that speaks to their creativity and things too. You don't create very well if you're exhausted. So, when you're looking at your schedule and you're thinking, gosh, I really wish we had time to just, make stuff, then where can you can't add hours to the day. So you're going to have to find some time for those kinds of things. And again, I do find it's best to be intentional. If I don't set aside time for piano practice, again, the shoemaker's children, right? You'd think my kids would be practicing hours every day. They don't. And if I don't set aside a time that happens, in the rhythm of our day, every day at the same time, then it doesn't happen. So if you're trying to set aside time for painting, if you're trying to set aside time for, taking in a ballet, whether it's live or recorded, whatever it is, you're going to have to set aside that time for it, and something else has got to give. And only you can decide what that is for you and your family. I personally do not thrive in a messy environment. And I understand the sentiment perhaps behind some of those, the thing that makes the rounds about babies don't keep. They don't. Babies don't keep. And enjoying my babies was infinitely more important than my floors. And yet, for me, I could not fully enjoy my babies with filthy floors. So, there's just such a fine balance, and I think for every person is different. We can't tell one parent or one caregiver how to find that time. Only you can find that time. Some moms, it's almost a badge of honor that they haven't taken a full shower in 2 or 3 years, and I hear you, I feel you. I've spent days like that, but again, for me, I don't feel well if I haven't gotten to spruce myself up every now and then. And there have definitely been seasons with my children when that happened a lot less often than I would have liked, especially when they were infants, even toddlers. But whatever you need to do to make time, that I'm not the boss of anybody. I'm not even the boss of my kids half the time. But to carve out that time, and only you know how to do that. But if you want to bring the arts home and make the creative process, or taking in someone else's creative process, part of your family culture, then you have to find the time for it. And you're the only one that knows where that time can be found. And the last thing is making mental space for it, making spiritual space for it. I mentioned before about wanting our children to have sleep, about my own need to have a tidy space and to feel clean. Maybe even do my hair, put on some makeup. If I'm not in a good place mentally or spiritually, I'm really not in a great place for creating either, or for guiding my children to create. So whatever that is for you, whatever that looks like for you, to make space in your own heart and mind for that. Maybe there's some dream that you have had. Maybe you really wish that you had time for more knitting or sewing. Maybe there's poetry that you want to write. Maybe there's a novel that you want to write. Maybe there's nonfiction that you want to write. That too is a creative endeavor. It just comes from a different place. But you have to find your own place for that and your own mental space for it, and do what you need to do to bring the arts home. So, bringing the arts home means making a place for it. We have to make a physical space for it. We have to make some kind of budgetary commitment, usually, unless you just already happen to have things lying around that you can use, which many of us do. You have to make room in your schedule. And it might just be, 10 minutes a day that you and your children sit down to create together, working on individual projects, or you pick up a project that you're going to work on together for a set amount of time. And we have to set aside our own preconceived notions about what we like, and we have to make space and make room in the box, maybe for some things that are outside of what we already know we like and appreciate. And we have to make that mental space for it, or that spiritual space, whichever you prefer to call it, so that you have it in you to spend on that creative endeavor. So as we're talking this month about bringing the arts home, and you're thinking about where to start by making space. I know that a lot of people that follow me, I follow your Instagram accounts too, those of you that are not private accounts, and I see the things that you like and things that you post, and I see that many of us are trying very hard to live more simply and to live more of a minimalist way, to consume less. And so as I thought about this talk today, one of the things that I'm trying to do is, before I bring anything new into our home, and I'm not telling you about food, I'm telling you about a new item of clothing or something new for the house, that I think, what will I pass on? What will I get rid of? What will I trade out of my home to make space for that? And that's where this talk comes from, that if we're going to bring the arts into our homes, chances are some of us have some other things that we need to pass on. And not that they're bad things, but we just have a limited amount of time and energy and resources. So I hope that you will find this talk helpful today, and I'd love to hear how you are making space for the arts in your home. Tell me your clever storage ideas. Tell me some tricks that you have for saving money on things. Tell me what it is that you do to find that mental, that headspace for the arts. What are you doing that's outside of the box? And I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.